South Korea is the single best-run Wall Street bets account on the planet. I'm not being cute here, and this isn't an analogy. Half of that country's entire stock index is a pair of memory chip companies. The government handed its own citizens 2 times leverage on those exact fucking companies, and then the president went on television and told everybody to buy. Every step of that was a decision an adult made on purpose in a building with a flag on it. And before we go any further, I need you to keep in mind that we're talking about a G20 economy with a central bank and a seat at the table. So how do you think this went? Quick word on the qualifications here, because I'm not an analyst and I don't work in semis. I don't work anywhere. They let me go back in March, and I've spent most of the time since then in a room watching a sovereign nation run the exact retarded trade I would have run, with a lot of the same reasoning. That's a strange feeling for a man with no fucking job, $340, and a Robinhood account. Normally when you watch somebody blow up, you get to feel superior about it for a couple of days. And I feel like that's most of the reason any of us watch this stuff at all. That option wasn't available to me. I would have bought it. I would have bought all of it. So let's take a look at the setup, because the setup is genuinely insane and almost nobody outside of Korea was paying attention to it. Samsung Electronics is 26% of the Kospi. SK Hynix is another 21%. That's 47% of an entire goddamn national stock market sitting in a pair of companies that make the exact same fucking product. And inside the Kospi 200, they crossed 50% for the first time in history this year. A year ago, that number was roughly half of what it is now. So for the smooth brains in the back, when a Korean pension fund buys the index, thinking it has bought a diversified basket of a whole country's economy, what it has actually bought is memory. And that's the whole country. That's not a portfolio, that's a position. And here's the part you can't skip, the part that makes all of this work. They were correct. Samsung is up more than 4 times since 2025. SK Hynix is up nearly 10. In July, Korean exports were up 62.8% year over year, and chip shipments specifically were up 179%. This is not some bullshit story about a company that doesn't exist. No fraud, no guy in a warehouse, no rebrand, no rockets in the DD. The world genuinely does need this stuff. They genuinely are the only people on Earth who can make enough of it, and the numbers genuinely printed. There are a lot of ways to lose money in the stock market, and this wasn't one of them, which is the problem, which is the single most dangerous thing that can happen to a degenerate: being correct. For those of you who don't follow this, the reason memory got hot is boring, and at the end of the day, you already know it. Every AI data center on Earth needs high bandwidth memory, and there isn't enough. DRAM spot prices are up something like 700% over the past year. A 16 gig chip that cost $6.84 in September was $27.20 by December. So the fabs stopped making the cheap stuff that goes in your laptop and started making the expensive stuff for the racks. And the 2 companies best at the expensive stuff both happen to sit in the same country about an hour apart. So that's the entire crisis. Everybody in the world wants the same thing at the same time, and the fact that Korea is the only place that can make enough of it is the whole story. Now, the concentration got so extreme that Goldman put out a note about it, and I think that note is my favorite piece of financial writing of the year. If Samsung and SK Hynix pick up 1 more percentage point of index weight, foreign funds are going to be legally forced to sell around $2 billion of them. Not because anybody wants to sell, because American diversification rules say a fund isn't allowed to be that concentrated in one place.
What? What the fuck?
So read that one back to yourself. The Korean stock market got so fucking good that it became illegal to own it properly. There's no version of that sentence where somebody isn't about to get hurt. And keep in mind, at this point, nobody has actually done anything wrong. So that's the board. Here's the move. On May 27th of this year, South Korea approved single stock leveraged ETFs, double the daily move of one individual company. And not on some sleepy utility either. The flagship products track Samsung and SK Hynix, the exact pair that are the index. So a Korean citizen could now walk into a broker and get 2 times levered long the country he lives in. If you want to know what it looks like when an entire country decides to leverage to the tits, this is it. I think that might be the most stupid financial product ever legally sold to a retarded person. And I want to be clear that I'm including everything Robinhood has ever done. This is a G20 economy. And they piled in. Retail investors put 78 trillion won into Korean stocks over May and June, about $54 billion. That is a lot of money to put into one idea in a matter of 8 weeks. The leveraged funds went from roughly 3 billion at launch to 14 trillion won, call it $9 billion, in a matter of weeks. 92% of the people holding them were retail. Not funds, not desks, not some brilliant quant at Merrill Lynch. 92% regular people buying a daily reset 2 times product on a single fucking semiconductor stock. And I can tell you, most of the degenerates on Wall Street bets have never even been offered a thing like that. We would have. We just weren't allowed. And the man out in front of all of this was the president. Lee Jae-myung came in pushing market reform, trying to get ordinary Koreans to stop parking their savings in apartments and start participating in the market. And he promoted these products as an opportunity. So the head of state effectively wrote the goddamn DD post. I've read a lot of DD in my life, and a lot of it was written by people who were drunk in the middle of the night. I've never once seen one with a flag behind it. I want to do the dates slowly, because the dates are the whole joke. The Samsung leverage product topped out on June 3rd. The SK Hynix one topped out on June 23rd. And then on June 29th, 6 days after the fucking top, President Lee stood up and announced the largest industrial commitment in the country's history. $576 billion of state-backed investment. Samsung and SK Hynix together pledging 3.2 quadrillion won, about $2.07 trillion, including an 800 trillion won chip cluster in the southwest and a plan to double the nation's memory capacity inside of 5 years. They committed $2 trillion of capex 6 days after the top. This is one of the most expensive pieces of timing in the history of the stock market, and you cannot teach conviction like that. Then July happened. The Kospi fell 22% in a single month, the worst month that index has had since 1990. Samsung down 21%, SK Hynix down 35%. 4 circuit breakers in 1 month, a record. At the lows, the index sat roughly 40% below a peak it had set 4 weeks earlier, and $2.18 trillion of market value just fucking stopped existing. And the leveraged products, the daily reset ones the degenerates were holding, the SK Hynix one is down more than 80% from its June peak. The Samsung one is down about 75%. There are a lot of ways to lose all of your money in this market, and almost none of them are that fast. Double leverage, 6 weeks, 80%. This is the part where it stops being funny for a second. Korean reporters went out and found these people, because there are a lot of them to find, and some of the stories are hard to sit through. One guy had borrowed 50 million won against his own apartment in order to buy more of it. One woman gave a quote I haven't been able to stop thinking about, and I want to read it to you exactly the way that she said it. I've engraved 2 rules in my mind now. First, don't invest in the Korean stock market. Second, follow the first rule. Underneath all of it, over and over, in the comments and on the calls and outside the brokerages, the same 4 words. Give me my money back. So the government did what a government does, meaning it turned up with the fucking safety equipment after everybody had already hit the ground. Keep in mind, this is the same government that put these things on the shelf in the first place. They halted new leveraged listings in the middle of July. They raised the minimum cash you need in order to trade one from 3 million won to 30 million won, a 10 times increase applied retroactively on a product they themselves approved 9 weeks earlier. Now they're proposing caps at 20% of your total investment. They're proposing higher trading costs. And my absolute favorite, the one I cannot get past, they're proposing a simulated trading requirement. You have to do a practice run now before they let you gamble.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
This is why nobody respects us. Then the finance minister stood up in parliament and apologized. Koo Yoon-chol, publicly, on the record, said the leveraged ETFs had not been considered carefully enough. A lawmaker told him to his face that the country had turned into a casino. And I want you to sit with how completely alien all of that is, because I've lost a genuinely fucking embarrassing amount of money on this platform, and Robinhood has never once apologized to me. Nobody has ever stood up in a legislature and said, "Sorry about your calls, you degenerate." In Korea, they held a hearing about it, which is, I think, the most dignity any of us is ever going to get. But here's what ruins the whole story, and I need you to hold both halves of this at the same time. That index, the one that just had its worst month since 1990, the one where $2.18 trillion evaporated, is still up 41.5% for the year in dollar terms. It's still one of the best performing stock markets in the entire world. Chip exports are still up 179%. Nothing about the thesis broke. Nobody lied to anybody. Korea was correct about memory. Korea is still correct about memory. And any boring coward who simply bought the shares and then sat there is doing completely fine. The 2 times is what fucking killed people. Leverage never once made you more correct. It only ever made the schedule shorter. So let's do the analysis. This is a G20 economy. Remember that one? It's still true. Everything in this video happened to a country with a central bank, a finance ministry, a working legislature, and one of the most sophisticated manufacturing bases on Earth. And it went exactly the way it goes in your shitty little account. Same order, shorter timeline, a lot more money. They found a real thesis. They levered it. They were correct. They got liquidated anyway. And I don't know what any of us expected. And now Korean retail is selling records into every rebound and telling reporters they are never buying again. Which, if you have ever said that out loud at 2 in the morning to nobody in particular, you already know is a thing degenerates say and not a thing degenerates do. Give me my money back. Nobody in the history of this market has ever gotten their money back. So to the degenerates in Seoul, and to the ones here, and to everybody who was completely correct about the trade and got taken out on the way to being proven correct, I have no notes. You did the reading. You found the real thing. At the end of the day, you were correct, which is more than I can say for most of the people on Wall Street bets. And then you did what all of us do, which is decide that being correct slowly was for cowards. The chips are still selling. The fabs are still going up. In 5 years, God willing, there's going to be twice as much memory in the world, and a lot of you aren't going to be around to see it. Financially speaking, I wish you nothing but unlevered exposure, patient capital, and a market that stays closed on the days you feel most confident.